Alright me darlings, so we've come back once again, but first... Oh, every Farthing Wood fan needs that fix every once in a while, otherwise we go on a rampage. The last thing we want is another repeat of the Farthing Wood riot of '96. Also, I think it's about time we paid attention to the amazing art people have done for me. Just having them on the thumbnails isn't enough, so... boom! There you go. Get used to seeing those, because there's going to be a lot more of them. Anyways, the first episode of the series, Comings and Goings, begins, and straight off the bat you're going to notice a big difference from the previous series. I know, I was shocked when I noticed it first too, but eventually it did sink in. So for those who haven't noticed it yet, brace yourselves, I'm about to drop the bomb. Kestrel's not in this series. No, of course not. The big thing everyone notices it at first is the drastically different animation, which switched out for the more semi-realistic, refined animal designs for more cartoony ones. While they may be fitting for some of the newer characters, seeing already established characters with these designs is quite an out-of-left-field change. It's like when animes put in time gaps between series, but this is even more drastic and confusing than those. Though I suppose this time they haven't put in a silly villain with unclear motivation and a surprising longevity. Hang on, wait a minute. I've been able to find out a little why the animation changed so much between seasons, but while it's rather surprising and a tad shocking at first, you do get used to it, and it does provide some advantages over the previous series animation, but I'll get more into that in the overview in a few weeks. But enough about the animation, it's time to get back to those characters that we all know and love. Say, it's been a while since we saw the Great White Stag. How's he doing?
Boy, son.
Ooh. Looks like someone needs some Pepto-Bismol. Yes, this series literally starts off with the death of the previous series narrator. The last one waited until halfway through to do that. This one's doing it straight away, as the stag absent-mindedly drinks from a stream that seems to have some kind of deadly chemical in it being dumped off by the typical douchebag humans. Is every human in this world Paris Hilton, Kim Kardashian and Dick Cheney combined into an animal's worst nightmare? Oh, and get used to seeing this guy while you can, because we're not going to be seeing him again for a while in this series. Sorry, buddy, but that's just what happens, I'm afraid. Don't you take that tone with me. People just become redundant, it's what happens. Well, the same to you, and your mother. Whistler passes by, still having trouble landing on dry land as always, and happens to witness the stag's death.
Oh no. No.
And then promptly goes off to tell the others about it.
I must tell Fox. Oh dear! Oh dear!
Whistler is slowly turning into the bearer of bad news round here, isn't he? On his way there, though, he comes across a familiar black and white face. Familiar to us, anyway. He's never met her before.
Is anything broken?
Only his pride. What little of it he has left after Series 2. Yes, Shadow has now entered the park. Why exactly she decided to do this is never explained, though the behind-the-scenes explanation all boils down to this new character.
Don't worry. I'm your friend. Yes, I saw the whole thing. Right out of the sky you fell. Are you alive?
I think that if he's moving around and looking at you with open eyes, it's a pretty good indication he's still alive, Einstein. Though then again, that can still apply to people who are actually dead. Yes, here we have one of the many new characters whose inclusion has been quite controversial to the fanbase. Meet Hercule, or to give him his more well-known name, Badger's replacement, voiced again by Ron Moody. See, in the books, Badger never died, and he also gained a mate at this point in the books, which is impressive on both accounts given his age. But in the show, they decided to kill him off to add a greater sense of tragedy and drama to the whole thing. That and probably just because it made sense given how old the guy was. But in the books, he still had quite a big inclusion in both battle and storm, so they decided to, you know, try and fill the role, but they didn't really have any other characters that already existed that were like him to fill the role with, so they invented this Welsh accented pink-nosed badger to do that for them. Hercule's never been one of the more favoured characters among the fan base, with his incredibly repetitive dialogue.
I'm kind. I'm very kind. I'm kind. So kind, so kind. Is that unkind, do you think?
Annoyingly naive nature, and the sheer insult that a character as awesome as Badger would be replaced by someone like this. But with all that, while I don't like seeing him, he doesn't exactly rank very high on my hate-o-meter. For the record, once we've seen all of my least favourite characters, I will be showing you the hate-o-meter, especially since we've got a whole lot more annoyance to come later on. In particular, one from a particular story arc where no character is likeable for even a second, but we'll get into that in a few episodes' time. Personally, I would have preferred Shadow had taken on the role of Badger completely, even though they do kind of share that with Hercule with a double act dynamic through the series. But wait, George, shouldn't you have waited until they were actually together to mention that? Well, maybe, yeah, but come on, we all knew it was coming. Who else is you going to get together with? Anyway, Whistler converses with Shadow and Hercule, and Shadow even reveals her history with Bold.
I'm Shadow. I knew Fox's son, Bold. He was one of you.
Bold. Yes, poor Bold.
Good to know the animals haven't forgotten Bold. Or maybe they actually have, because that's the only time he's mentioned in this series besides one other moment. Despite the fact that his former mate and his best friend are living in the park, plus one other person who would call him to mind, but we'll get into that in a minute. But I digress. Whistler goes off to see Fox, and we then cut to the introduction of our villain faction for this series. So last series we had hunters, evil blue foxes, more hunters, and Weasel singing. So what's the antagonistic element of this series?
Here, look what I found.
Oh, look at that.
Yes, we got a pack of rats this series, and unless that rat pack has Sammy Davis Jr. or Frank Sinatra in it, I ain't interested. Okay, to be fair, despite the somewhat odd choice, rats are a genuine threat to animals in wildlife enclosures, if just for the sheer number of them that can swarm and breed within the area and then spread disease and steal the food supplies. So at the very least we got something different this series, but can still be used as a viable threat. But eventually the leader of the rats rears his ugly face. No, not him. A long-tailed albino rat by the name of Bully, voiced again by Ron Moody, and like many characters in this series, is obsessed with cramming in his contrived catchphrase.
Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?
Either he's really conscious about his authority, or he's got long-term memory loss and keeps forgetting his own name. Either way, it doesn't make it any less repetitive or annoying. Now, despite people's views on him, I actually don't mind Bully that much. Moody does a good job with his voice, and he can be intimidating sometimes, particularly since he has a whole army of rats at his beck and call. But unlike the baddies of the last series, Bully and his gang have a lot of comic relief to their scenes, and while it can be funny sometimes, it does take away from the threat of the main villains when you see them doing stuff like this.
And who's gonna stop us, eh? Who am I?
Yeah, doesn't that send chills down the spine? Anyway, they come across the stag's dead body and decide that now is the perfect time to begin the plan of taking over White Deer Park, because apparently the city they came from has become too dangerous and harsh for them to live in, and apparently want to move their litter someplace nicer.
Well, lads, the great white stag itself, stone dead. What a piece of luck for us, eh? What did we come here for, eh, brat?
Here. What do we come... that's an easy one. We come to take over White Deer Park.
Right.
I guess no matter who you are, if you live in a city too long, you'll begin to hate it. Meanwhile, we cut over to the ones we've been waiting all year to see again. Fox, Vixen, and their grandson Plucky, voiced by Rupert Farley, who is, of course, Bold and Whisper's cub. Though what's actually funny is that in the books, he's actually described as Whisper's grandson. Though of course because they skipped over Siege of White Deer Park, Husky isn't in this series, though the thought of Fox siring 3 new generations of cubs and still being alive is a bit of a stretch personally, especially considering that I don't know if in the wild, but in the city it's hard enough for a fox to survive the birthing process, let alone actually get there to see grandkids. Anyway, Plucky's having fun racing his best friend and Hare's granddaughter Dash, voiced by Pamela Kevikral. If by the slim chance you're watching Pamela, I really apologise, I cannot pronounce your last name to save my life.
Lovely morning for a race, Dashy.
Not again. I always win.
I know you always win, but I feel extra special fast today. To the gorse bush.
And back again.
You're on. Come on, Plucky.
He'll never outrun that hare.
Yes, he will. He's my grandson, isn't he?
Yeah, but Hare still beat you racing across the road back in the old days. Oh, by the way, don't expect to see Hare. I'm assuming that he's passed on because he doesn't appear in this series either. Fox and Vixen's designs and voices have changed a bit, and there's definitely a look as if they've been through 3 series, and their age is catching up with them. It's actually really great to see that attention to detail, and it's kind of endearing and a bit of a bittersweet feel to see Fox lamenting how old he's gotten.
Come on, Plucky.
Once upon a time, I was the fastest fox of them all. Now, out of all the foxes in White Deer Park, I'm the slowest.
If it wasn't for you, Fox, there would be no red foxes left alive in White Deer Park to race hares on a spring morning. Not to mention all the other animals. You've saved us all from one thing or another so many times.
I suppose you're right, Vixen. Yes. After all the troubles we've had in the past, this spring is full of hope and new life. This will be our best, our happiest year ever.
Never, ever, ever say that! It's like saying this is the best Christmas Wolford's ever going to have. Never get used to having peace and tranquility in a TV show. I guess in that regard you could say their hopes are about to be dashed? I'm back, bitches. Speaking of which, Plucky's race is ruined by him tripping over Weasel just before the finish line, and Dash leaves him in the dust. Plucky, understandably pissed, starts yelling at Weasel, but, well, Weasel's got some news for everyone. News that the great oracles of Farthing Wood said would bring the end of joy and happiness for the Farthing Wood animals, and destroy the eardrums of all across the land. The news that every Farthing Wood fan cringes at the thought of. Are you ready? Here it is.
You'd think I'd get some sympathy, some consideration. After all, in my condition...
Condition?
Condition?
Weasel, are you? She is. Congratulations.
Oh yes, you heard her right. Weasel is pregnant. Please do carry on. So yes, we've got more Weasels on the way, and trust me, it's just as bad as it sounds. Even worse, actually, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. However, despite everyone's supposed joy, one member of the park isn't very happy at the prospect, which puts him at the same position as the audience right now. But before we can meet him, Whistler crashes in and tells everyone the bad news about the stag. Everyone's horrified, of course, but as always, Al comes in with the logic and asks the obvious question.
He was a fine friend to us all. Our protector.
Dreadful shame, of course. But what I want to know is, which stag is going to take his place?
Al's got a point. The biggest stag in the herd is a right thuggish monster.
Did you say right fucking monster? Oh, right thuggish monster, okay. Open your mouth wider next time when you talk. But yes, the next in line in this game of antlers of White Deer Park is Trey, a brash, arrogant and temperamental little shit who, as I stated earlier, hates weasels, which of course doesn't bode well for our new little happy family here. And in her worry of what will happen to said family, Weasel starts going into her paranoia frenzy, which causes Al to try and be the voice of reason, with her own insulting flair, as always.
Weasel, do stop being such a ninny. Perhaps this bad-tempered bully stag won't take the great white stag's place after all. You always make such a fuss.
You'd make a fuss if you had little ones to worry about. I'll have you know I am in a delicate condition.
Dearie me, that will mean more weasels. Twice the fuss and bother. Ugh!
What a cheek you've got, sitting up there all hoity-toity, insulting my little ones when they aren't even born yet.
I was merely saying.
You can say what you like, but you haven't got a mate, have you? Look, I've got a mate, a big, strong, brave weasel. He's gorgeous.
That might be the nicest thing that Weasel has ever said about Measley, and it was all an attempt to be a bitch to Owl. But sadly, Owl takes Weasel's words to heart, rather uncharacteristically at that, and realises that Weasel is right and that she doesn't have a mate.
I've often thought of taking a mate, but I've never found the right owl.
You mean that every owl you've ever met has flown off in the opposite direction double quick?
Boom! Weaselly payback, bitch! But of course, the words find their target all too easy, and Owl quite literally flaps off in a huff. Meanwhile, our first Farthing Wooder first comes in contact with Bully and his plague.
Who am I?
I don't think we've met, have we? I'm Mossy.
Oh, howdy do. I'm Bully, that's who I am. Leader of the pack, as it were. Spike, my dear chap, do you want to kill him, or shall I?
Wow, Bully doesn't mess around, does he? I mean, Scarface might have been a bit vitriolic to the animals when he first met them, but he only really threatened Weasel, and to be fair, I think anyone who first met Weasel has threatened her, but he never actually tried to kill them at first. Fortunately for Mossy, Measley comes across this scene from Reservoir Rats, and luck would have it, in this world, the rats are scared more of one species of animal than any other.
Oh, it's a wheeze!
It's a weasel! A weasel!
I guess they're worried that he's going to try and sing at them, like some really annoying vermin version of Meloetta. Yep, the only time Weasel and Measley have a chance to be useful by scaring off the rats, though sadly that doesn't work out, as we'll see. Bully and his gang retreat back to their hideout, which is— oh, come on! This is ridiculous! This is Farthing Wood, not Master of the Universe! Why would a rock have a formation that looks like a rat's head? I know this is a cartoon, but even for Farthing Wood this is stupid. Ugh. Anyway, while the rats quiver in fear from an animal with the muscle definition of white bread and the voice of Kenneth Williams, Owl laments on Weasel's words. Speedy, rather surprisingly, tries to comfort Owl, but she says that she's had enough and flies off from White Deer Park to go and find a mate, which is the start of one of the many sub-stories of this series, but we'll get into that in a few weeks.
Bye-bye, Owl. Bye-bye.
Godspeed, Owl. So yes, Owl's gone out of the park without telling anyone except Speedy. How rude! Though I guess she is planning to come back eventually. Meanwhile, Measley is being his typical loud and annoying self to try and find Weasel, which stirs the anger of a very large and rather pushy deer nearby.
Oh, you're not...
I am Trey. Never have I heard such a terrible noise.
You and me both, buddy. At least 2 people in this episode can empathise with my plight. And the torture I'll be putting myself through in a few weeks' time. So yes, it's here where we first meet Trey, voiced by Rupert Farley, in one of his more unrecognisable voice roles.
If I hear you again, once, ever, I shall stamp on you. I don't like weasels.
Of which he sounds like he's trying to do the world's worst Malcolm McDowell impression.
Shut up! Shut your mouth! And you! What are you looking at?
Anyway, Trey tries to run the pair out of the park, and while doing so, they pass by Ada, who has come across a new friend of her own.
Did they wake you?
If you must know, yes.
Troublesome things, weasels.
Oh, you could cut the sexual tension with a spoon. This is Sinuous, the male snake of White Deer Park with the pencil-thin moustache and the voice of Alan Rickman. And yes, that does mean I'll be doing this throughout the series.
Then again, now that you've proven yourself against a troll, a little game of Quidditch should be easy work for you. Even if it is against Slytherin.
I've got to do some kind of running voiceover gag now that the Scarface ones have dried up. Anyway, as you can imagine, Ada is less than impressed with him at first.
I'm Sinuous.
So am I.
No, it's my name. Sinuous.
Very apt, I'm sure.
Oh, mateys, springs in the air, I see.
Whoa, Toad, come on, keep it clean. This is still a kid's show. I mean, my show isn't, but that show's supposed to be. But as time goes on, or rather just by looking into each other's eyes, the love begins to blossom. Sinuous is one of the more popular characters amongst the fan base for reasons that I'll get into as we go along, but I can't deny that he does have a distinct lack of personality difference compared to Ada. But who needs it when Ada's as awesome as she is?
Are you incapable of restraining yourself, or do you take pride in being an insufferable know-it-all?
Meanwhile, Weasel is pissed off at Trey's treatment with her, as you can imagine, but Fox says that there's little he can do about it since Trey wouldn't listen to him like the old stag would. Or he would say that, but it seems like after 3 years of this, everyone's lost their patience with the Weasel, so he then says this.
Listen to yourselves. It's all your own fault. I've never heard such a dreadful noise. It's no wonder Trey lost his temper with you. Who wouldn't?
Harsh, but all too true. Not wanting to take any more abuse for her family, Weasel decides to leave the park and find new pastures for herself and the little ones.
Weasel, where are you going?
Away from White Deer Park!
Wait for me.
Forever!
Forever? Oh.
Which you may think is a blessing in disguise, but unfortunately a camera crew thought it would be a fun idea to follow them on their journey, and that's the other sub-story of this series, so we'll get to that in time, but believe me, Drillber here is going to have his work cut out for him when we get to that part of the series. So with half the park now vacated and the missing residents slowly being replaced by rats, coupled with the fact that the rats' biggest threat has now been eliminated, so to speak, the writing's on the wall for the animals and the shit's about to hit the fan.
It's that Weasel and his mate. They're gone. Gone! Yeah!
Gone.
They've gone, have they, bully? Well, I'm glad for you, but you're still not top dog yet. Seriously though, how lucky are these hairy little bastards? First the leader of the park dies, then their sworn species enemy leaves the park on the same day. What next? Are the rats going to find a rat the size of a dog to take on bigger animals? Are they going to resurrect the spirit of Scarface to protect them? Are they going to use their tails like Spider-Man's web swing? Just one of those was a lie, by the way.
It's all ours now, this pretty park. Yours and mine. Mine and yours. Who am I?
So what to make of the first episode of Series 3? Well, as with most first episodes of Farthing Wood, it seems to set up the status quo very quickly and set things into motion as quickly as it can, which does seem to be good at first, but also it does come to having some of the characters who will be important in the series seem like they don't have a lot of screen time or a chance to shine. Toad, Plucky, Dash and Laird have very little bits of dialogue or screen time. Or in the case of Laird, doesn't appear at all. Plus it also feels as if they're trying to cram too much in at once to start making the whole thing feel a bit mismanaged and hectic, not helped by the fact that we keep switching narratives in future episodes, but we'll get into that later. Also, it seems that the people in charge of writing the EBU their checks wanted a more kid-friendly environment for this series, as you may have been able to tell with the drastically different animation style and greater amounts of comic relief, which, while it can be a decent change at times, it does feel like they've tampered with something that didn't really need to be fixed, but they did so because a focus group told them to, which does seem really lazy and quite frankly idiotic, but I don't want to really sound too harsh to people who are just doing their job in that regard. Despite that, it is great to see the old gang again, and we do get some classic Farthing Wood action from all our favourites, but you can tell that the idea of multiple unconnected stories was rather ham-fistedly inserted into the series, and as a result will come to a series that feels very different to the last two, and the one that makes the most changes from the books, and the last two did as well, but we'll save that for the future episodes. Overall, this isn't a bad episode at all, but I can begin to see the seeds of doom beginning to sprout out of the earth. But now it's time to move on, and for the next week we'll be going into a different style of review for my show, and where I'll be going over the first half of the entire rat story arc in one episode, so that's going to be exhausting, but it's all for you guys. But now I've had enough, I'm going on the other side to have a bath. Bye! has to be a point where it's just like, I watch this back in the future and I just think, what the hell am I doing? And to be fair, I'm kind of thinking at the moment, only his pride, what little it's a real tongue twister, that one. Unless that Rat Pack has, oh Christ. I do worry because the end of that thing is magnetic, so there's small shavings of metal on the end, and I'm worried about what that's going to do. Do not put a drill to your head at home, people. This would be a very, very, very bad idea. The only reason why I'm doing it is because I've taken the battery off, so there's no way it could even go right now. So do not do this at home. Suddenly got a lot sunnier now, hasn't it? Where were you earlier? I'll give you a view of the floor later, but there's 2 bottles of water down there, a drill and 2 spoons, so that's the props I've used in today's episode. And of course, our little orange friend here. And no, this bit does not count. Ada is less than God, the light today is making me look terrible. I look like I'm in my late 30s or something. Makes my hair look silver and has distinct jowls around my face. Well, as I promised you, now I've finished, I've got to take the camera off to get the footage. I'll actually show you what's on the floor. There you go. 2 bottles of water, 2 spoons and a drill, just like I said. Now it's time to get the footage off this camera and start editing.